She thought she could fool me forever. The lies, the secrecy, all carefully hidden behind sweet words and empty promises. But what she didn't know was that I was always one step ahead, watching as she tangled herself deeper in her own web of deceit. This isn't your typical story of betrayal. It's about how I turned the tables, using her own choices to bring her downfall. You'll see how trust can be shattered, and how one person's intention to control a situation can spiral into chaos. In the end, I walked away free, while she was left to pick up the pieces of her broken life. Stay with me as I take you through every twist and turn. I've thought long and hard before sitting down to write this. There's something about looking back at my past with Madison that stirs a mix of emotions: regret, pain, and strangely, a bit of satisfaction. We met in what seemed like the perfect setup, working together on a branding project that kept us close, almost too close. It started innocently enough: banter over coffee, late-night brainstorming sessions, and those lingering looks that hinted at something more. Before long, we weren't just co-workers anymore. 1 year into our relationship, things felt right, or at least we thought so. We took a leap and got married, but there was one problem: her family. They never thought I was enough for her. Too poor, they said. And well, that was just the beginning. As newlyweds, we tried to ignore the whispers from her family, brushing off their sharp remarks about my background. Madison assured me it didn't matter, but I could see how it weighed on her, even if she wouldn't admit it. Our connection, once so natural and effortless, started to feel strained. Little did we know, that was the first crack in our foundation. I suppose you could say we were naive, still clinging to the idea that love could overpower any outside force. But their disapproval, their intention to drive a wedge between us, was always there, simmering beneath the surface. I was determined to make things work, though. We had made a promise to each other, and I was willing to do whatever it took to honor that. The more time passed, the clearer it became that Madison was torn between me and them. No matter how hard I tried, her family's opinion hovered over us like a dark cloud. It wasn't long before I realized that their constant criticism, their insinuations, were having an effect on her. She wasn't the same woman I had fallen in love with. There was something off, a distance that grew with each passing day. And just like that, the warmth between us started to cool. But that was only the start of what would become an unraveling far beyond anything I could have expected. We didn't rush into the idea of having children, mostly because Madison wanted to focus on her career. But when we finally did try, the joy of expecting quickly turned into something darker. It's hard to describe the moment when you realize it's all gone. That hope, that future you'd already started to imagine, snatched away in a blink. Madison was shattered, and I did everything I could to ease her pain. I bought her a new car, hoping it might bring some excitement back into her life. We even hired an assistant to help her around the house. But nothing seemed to fill the void left by the loss. It was as if a part of her heart had closed off, and no matter how much I tried, I couldn't reach her. After the miscarriage, things got heavier between us. Madison had always been strong, but now she seemed fragile, withdrawn. I could sense that she was struggling, but every attempt I made to comfort her fell flat. I thought the new car or the assistant would bring some light into her days, but the satisfaction was short-lived. It didn't take long for the cracks in our marriage to deepen. I tried to hold on, to keep us together, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Madison was slipping away from me. I was watching the person I loved spiral into a sadness I couldn't pull her out of. And just like that, our once promising future seemed to crumble. As the months went by, I noticed Madison withdrawing even more, not just from me, but from everything. She avoided talking about what had happened, and there was a coldness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. I thought maybe time would heal us, that if I kept trying, things would get better. But every gesture, every attempt to make things right, only seemed to push her further away. The miscarriage was a wound that left a scar on both of us, but for Madison, it was more than that. It was a turning point, one I hadn't realized would shift everything between us. It didn't take long before the distance between us turned into something else, something heavier. Madison started leaving the house more often, always with some vague excuse about needing space or going to her family's place. At first, I believed her. After all, I thought she just needed time to heal. But as her trips became more frequent, I began to wonder if it was something more. Our conversations turned into arguments, usually about nothing important, small things that somehow exploded into bigger fights. The tension was palpable, like we were both waiting for the other to crack. And in those moments, I couldn't help but wonder if we were too far gone to fix it. Her family, of course, never tried to help. If anything, they made things worse. Every time Madison went to them, she came back more distant, colder, like they were feeding her doubts about us. I tried to reach out to her brothers, hoping to smooth things over, but that only made it worse. During one particularly heated argument, they had the nerve to accuse me of causing the miscarriage, as if my presence in Madison's life had somehow cursed us both. I was furious, but more than that, I felt helpless. No matter what I did, it seemed like Madison was slipping further away from me, and her family was all too happy to see it happen. In a desperate attempt to save what was left of our marriage, I suggested we try couples therapy. For a while it worked. There were moments in those sessions where I could see glimpses of the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman who still cared. We managed to reconnect, at least on the surface, and I allowed myself to hope that maybe we could fix this. But deep down, I knew it was only a temporary band-aid. There was something else, something unsaid between us that therapy couldn't touch. And that's when I realized Madison had already checked out. I just hadn't fully seen it yet. One night, when Madison claimed she was meeting friends, something didn't sit right with me. I don't know what it was, a gut feeling, maybe. So I decided to drive by the restaurant she mentioned, just to ease my mind. But instead of seeing her with the usual crowd, there she was, sitting across from a man I'd never seen before. They were laughing, leaning in closer than friends should. It was like a punch to the gut, and I couldn't tear my eyes away. That's when I learned his name, Blake. But that wasn't the worst part. No, the worst part was realizing that this wasn't some casual fling. This had been going on for a while. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I started to dig. It didn't take long to figure out who Blake was, and what I found shook me. He wasn't just some random guy. He was a con artist, a fraud who had a history of preying on women like Madison. He had a record of sweet-talking his way into their lives, convincing them to invest in business ventures that never existed, only to disappear with their money. And now, it seemed, Madison was his next target. The irony wasn't lost on me. She thought she was in control, that she was playing me, but it was Blake who was pulling the strings. And she didn't even see it. The betrayal cut deep, but what hurt more was watching Madison fall for someone who was using her. I knew I had to act, but I wasn't sure how. The anger, the frustration, it all boiled under the surface, but I kept it in check. I needed a plan, something that would turn the tables without giving myself away. So I stayed quiet, pretending I didn't know. But inside, I was already working out how to make both Madison and Blake pay for what they'd done. And as much as it hurt, there was a strange sense of satisfaction in knowing I was one step ahead. After discovering the truth, I knew I couldn't just confront Madison. No, that would be too easy. Instead, I began to distance myself, emotionally withdrawing while acting like everything was normal. I encouraged her to spend more time with Blake, subtly feeding into her delusion that she was in control. She fell deeper into his promises, business deals that sounded too good to be true, investments that seemed almost magical. I knew exactly what was happening, but I didn't stop her. I let her believe she was making these choices, that she had the upper hand. All the while, I was preparing for the inevitable crash. Madison started taking out loans, investing more money into Blake's schemes. At first, it was small amounts, nothing noticeable. But soon, she drained her savings, mortgaged her future, all for Blake's promises of quick satisfaction and easy wealth. It was almost painful to watch, but at the same time, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of justice. After all, she had betrayed me, and now she was getting involved in something far worse. The more she trusted Blake, the more reckless she became. But I kept my distance, knowing that Blake would eventually show his true colors. And when that day came, I wanted to be there to watch it all unfold. It wasn't long before Blake disappeared, just as I knew he would. One day, he was gone without a trace, taking everything Madison had invested with him. She was left with nothing but debt and heartbreak. She tried to reach him, but by then it was too late. The reality hit her like a freight train, and as she sat there, surrounded by the ruins of her life, I remained calm. I had played my part perfectly, and now the pieces were falling exactly where I wanted them. Madison had no idea that I had known all along. Now, all that was left was for me to step in, reveal the truth, and finish what I had started. When Madison finally realized the extent of her mistake, she came back to me, desperate and broken. She begged for help, but by then, I had nothing left to give her, emotionally or otherwise. I calmly revealed that I had known everything, from the affair with Blake to the loan she had taken out to fund his fraudulent schemes. The look on her face was priceless, a mix of shock, guilt, and fear. I laid out all the evidence, the receipts, the transactions, the lies. There was no denying it. She had betrayed me, and worse, she had ruined herself in the process. But as much as it hurt to watch her crumble, I knew this was the only way. Madison tried to convince me that we could still fix things, that we could move past it all. But I had already made my decision. I filed for divorce, and in the courtroom, things played out exactly as I had planned. She was left responsible for all the debts, every last cent she had borrowed in her blind trust of Blake. I walked away with nothing to my name but my freedom, which was all I really wanted. No alimony, no responsibility for the financial mess she had created. It was, in a way, the perfect ending to a marriage that had been doomed from the start. As the legal dust settled, I felt a strange sense of closure. Madison had lost everything, not just me, but her security, her future. And while part of me felt sympathy for her, another part couldn't help but feel that this was exactly the outcome she deserved. I had done nothing illegal, nothing violent. I had simply let her own actions lead her to this point. Now, as I stood on the other side of it all, I was free to start over, without the weight of her betrayal dragging me down. Even now, after everything is unraveled, Madison still tries to reach out. She's left me messages, showed up at my door more than once, asking for another chance. But I'm done. There's nothing left to say. I acted calmly, and within the law, never crossing any lines. And while she may think I'm cruel for not taking her back, I know the truth. She destroyed us long before I did anything. It was her choices, her actions that led to her downfall. All I did was stand back and let it happen. Now, the only thing left is to make sure she stays out of my life for good. That's why I'm considering a restraining order. As much as I want to move on, Madison doesn't seem to know how to let go. And I'm not interested in going back to the mess we once had. I've finally reached a point where I can see a future for myself. One that doesn't involve her or the drama she brings with her. The satisfaction of knowing I handled this without losing my integrity is something I'll carry with me. But it's time to close this chapter completely, and that means cutting ties, once and for all. Now that I've come out the other side, I'm ready to move forward with my life. I've learned a lot from this, about trust, about intention, and about the power of letting someone's own actions catch up with them. Madison may have thought she could fool me forever, but in the end, I was always one step ahead. And now, as I finally let go of the past, I can start to build something new, something that's mine, without the shadow of betrayal hanging over me. This is the end of our story, but the beginning of something better.
Keep watching our stories by clicking on one of the videos that appear on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be alerted about new videos. See you next time.